My name is Jessica Monroe, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the disappointment in my family, the accident, the child they didn't plan for and definitely didn't want. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Growing up, I got used to the whispers at family gatherings, the backhanded compliments, the way my mother's smile would fade when someone mentioned my name right after my sister's. Because my sister, Rebecca, was the golden one, the perfect daughter, the lawyer, the pride, the reason my parents held their heads high at church every Sunday. And me? I was the one who never lived up to her potential. It's funny how the world can decide who you are before you even get a chance to prove them wrong. I still remember the night that changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday, and I was working late at the diner downtown, scrubbing tables while the thunder rolled outside. I had no idea that, a few miles away, my sister's life was falling apart in a way that would drag my entire family down with it. When I got home, the police cars were already in front of my parents' house. Red and blue lights flashing across the white porch, neighbors whispering through curtains. I ran up the driveway, apron still tied around my waist. "Mom, what's going on?" She turned toward me, her face pale, her voice trembling. They arrested Rebecca," she whispered. My stomach dropped. Arrested? For what? For fraud. Embezzlement. I froze. I couldn't even process the words. My sister? The one they worshipped? The one who never did anything wrong? I followed them inside, where my dad sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The news played on the TV. Local attorney Rebecca Monroe charged with stealing funds from her firm's clients. My mother's voice was sharp, almost venomous. "They're saying she stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it's a lie. Someone set her up. Someone." I didn't say anything. I just listened like I always did. Because no matter what Rebecca did, my parents always found a way to protect her. But that night, something was different. For once, Rebecca wasn't untouchable. Days turned into weeks. The headlines got worse. Trusted lawyer faces prison. Monroe family in scandal. I wanted to feel sorry for her. I really did. But part of me, deep down, felt something else. Something dangerous. Justice. Because while she was their pride, I was their shadow. They never came to my high school graduation. They forgot my birthdays. My mom once told a neighbor, "Jessica's a bit slow to figure out life, but Rebecca? She's destined for greatness." And yet, here I was, the forgotten one, watching the great Rebecca Monroe finally face consequences for once. Still, I stayed quiet. When the trial date came, my parents begged me to attend, not because they wanted me there, but because they wanted to look united. They cared about how it would look to the cameras. So, I went. I sat in the back of that cold courtroom, invisible as always. Rebecca sat at the defense table, her once perfect posture wilted. Her lawyer whispered urgently beside her. My parents sat in the front row, pretending to be victims. And then the judge walked in. He was older, maybe late 50s, with silver hair and a calm authority that filled the room. Everyone stood, then sat again. The trial began, the charges were read, the evidence presented, bank transfers, client statements, forged signatures. It was brutal. But it was in the middle of the second day, during cross-examination, when everything shifted. Rebecca's lawyer asked to call me as a character witness. Me. I hadn't expected that. My mother turned sharply, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe it either. I walked slowly to the stand. My palms were sweating, my heart hammering in my chest. As I took my seat and raised my hand to be sworn in, the judge looked up from his notes and froze. His eyes locked on mine. Confusion. Recognition. Shock. He leaned forward slightly, whispering under his breath. "Wait, you're—" The room went still. Even the air felt heavy. My mother's face drained of color. My father's hands gripped the bench. Everyone stared. I swallowed hard, not knowing what he meant, or what was about to happen next. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible anymore. The courtroom fell into a tense silence after the judge whispered those words. "Wait, you're—" My throat went dry. I glanced at my parents, but they looked just as stunned as everyone else. The judge blinked, straightened his glasses, and quickly masked his reaction. "Proceed," he said firmly, though his voice trembled just slightly, just enough for me to notice. I swallowed hard and sat there, trying to steady my breath. I didn't understand what had just happened, but I knew it wasn't normal. As the questioning began, my sister's lawyer tried to paint Rebecca as the good one, hardworking, successful, victim of a misunderstanding. He asked me about our childhood, our family. "How would you describe your relationship with your sister, Jessica?" he asked with a polite smile. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "We're different," I said finally. "Rebecca was always the one my parents were proud of. I was the quiet one. I tried to stay out of trouble." "Did you and Rebecca ever have disagreements?" I gave a small laugh. "We had different worlds. I worked part-time jobs. She went to private school. We didn't really have much to fight about." He nodded. "But you believe she's innocent, right?" The whole room seemed to lean in. My parents stared at me, silently begging me to say yes. I looked at Rebecca. Her eyes met mine, desperate, pleading. And I realized something in that moment. She didn't look sorry. She looked scared. But not scared of prison, scared of something else. I turned back to the lawyer. "I don't know what to believe anymore," I said quietly. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe," the lawyer muttered, clearly flustered. As I stepped down from the stand, I noticed the judge watching me again, like he was searching for something. His gaze wasn't judging, it was recognizing. But from where? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the judge's expression. The confusion. The whisper. I sat in bed scrolling through old news clippings about the case, trying to make sense of everything. That's when I saw it. The judge's full name. Judge Alan Prescott. The name stirred something deep in my memory. I had seen it before, years ago. I dug through my old email archives and found it. An acceptance letter from the state scholarship program I never got to use because my parents refused to let me go. The signature at the bottom? Alan Prescott, then a law professor who ran the scholarship committee. I remembered meeting him once. I was 17, nervous, clutching my portfolio. He had shaken my hand and said, "You have a gift for justice, Jessica. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I smiled bitterly. My parents had convinced me otherwise. They said college was a waste of money. That Rebecca needed help with her tuition, not me. They made me decline the scholarship. And now, years later, the same man who believed in me sat in judgment of my sister, the one who took everything I was supposed to have. The irony was cruel. The next day in court, the tension was thicker. Reporters filled the benches. Cameras flashed outside the doors. During a recess, as everyone shuffled out, the judge quietly called my name. "Ms. Monroe, a word, please." I froze, glancing at my parents. My mother looked horrified. My father whispered something under his breath I couldn't hear. I followed the judge into his chambers. He closed the door gently, then turned to me with a strange mix of compassion and confusion. "You're Jessica Monroe," he said softly. "From the state scholarship program 8 years ago. I remember you." I blinked. You do?" He nodded. "You wrote an essay on justice, one of the best I'd ever read. I was surprised when you declined the offer. Your family said you weren't unwell." My chest tightened. "Unwell?"
"Yes."
"They told the board you weren't mentally stable enough to handle university life, that you'd been seeing a therapist for delusional behavior." My mouth fell open. "That's not true. None of it." He sighed deeply. "I thought so, but it wasn't my place to interfere." I felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. My family had lied to destroy my future so Rebecca could have hers. And now, the irony was complete. The same lies that built her career were collapsing in front of the same man they once deceived. The judge's expression softened. "Jessica," he said quietly, "I can't discuss your sister's case outside of court. But sometimes, truth has a way of finding its voice, no matter how long it's been silenced." I left his chambers shaking. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, truly seen. And I made a silent promise. I would not stay quiet anymore. Because if Rebecca's truth was coming out in court, then so was mine. The next few days of the trial blurred together, witness after witness, document after document, all painting Rebecca as guilty. But beneath the surface, something darker was starting to unfold. I could see it in the way Rebecca's eyes darted around the courtroom. The way my mother clutched her purse like she was hiding something. The way my father refused to meet my gaze. They were terrified. Not of the verdict, but of what I might find out. And they were right to be scared, because I had started digging. It began with a visit to the local library after court one evening. I sat down at one of the public computers and started searching through public records, old property deeds, tax filings, and business registrations connected to my family's name. At first, it was just curiosity. But then, my blood ran cold. Rebecca's law firm wasn't the only place money had gone missing. There were transfers, large ones, linked to a fake business my parents had registered under my name. Monroe Consulting, LLC. The company had been inactive for years, but the tax records showed thousands of dollars passing through it, the same time Rebecca was climbing her career ladder. My name, my identity, my signature. I printed everything and stuffed it in a folder, my hands trembling. They hadn't just lied about me being unstable. They'd used my name to funnel money, probably to cover Rebecca's debts. And I had proof. The next morning, I slipped quietly into the courtroom again. Rebecca sat rigid beside her lawyer, looking tired, her once perfect hair disheveled. My parents whispered behind her, their faces pale and drawn. When court recessed for lunch, I stood up, walked right past them, and leaned toward Rebecca. "I know," I said softly. Her eyes flicked up, fear flashing across her face. "Know what?" "About Monroe Consulting. About the fake business in my name." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I whispered. "You all took my future, my identity, and now you expect me to stay quiet while you beg for sympathy in front of the cameras?" "Jessica, please," my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. "Not here." I pulled away. "Then where, Mom?" "Because the courtroom seems like the perfect place to finally tell the truth." Their silence was answer enough. That night, I couldn't stop shaking. The betrayal hit deeper than I thought it could. I remembered being 19, sitting at the kitchen table, telling my parents I'd gotten a call about a scholarship follow-up, and they told me not to waste my time. Now I knew why. They had already used my name for something else. It wasn't that they didn't believe in me. It was that they needed me to stay invisible, so Rebecca could shine. The next day, I made my move. During cross-examination, Rebecca's lawyer was trying to prove that the missing money wasn't all her doing, that others may have been involved. So I stood up. My hands were sweating, my heart hammering, but I walked straight to the prosecutor's table during recess and handed over the folder I'd printed. "New evidence," I said. "It connects the family to the money trail." They flipped through the papers, their expressions changing from confusion to shock. "Are you willing to testify to this, Ms. Monroe?" I took a deep breath. Yes. That afternoon, they recalled me to the stand again. The courtroom was packed this time. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras clicked. My parents looked horrified. Rebecca's face was ghost white. The prosecutor handed me the printed records. "Ms. Monroe, can you confirm that these documents were filed under your legal name and social security number?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And were you aware that a company called Monroe Consulting, LLC existed?"
No.
"Until 2 days ago, I'd never heard of it." The prosecutor turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, these records show transactions tied to the defendant's accounts routed through her sister's fake business, a shell company created to conceal embezzled funds." Gasps filled the room. My mother covered her mouth. My father's eyes closed. Rebecca's lawyer objected. Irrelevant. But the judge overruled. Then slowly the judge looked at me. There it was again, that recognition. That deep, quiet sadness in his eyes. "Ms. Monroe," he said softly, "thank you for your courage." As I stepped down from the stand, Rebecca whispered, "You ruined me." I paused, turning just enough to meet her eyes. "No, Rebecca. You did that yourself. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. I walked past my parents. They didn't say a word. My mother's eyes were wet. My father stared at the floor. And as I pushed open those heavy courtroom doors, a wave of something unexpected washed over me. Not triumph, not anger, but relief. Because for the first time in my life, I had spoken. The next day, the courtroom felt heavier than ever. The air was thick, charged, like everyone knew something monumental was about to happen. I sat quietly at the back again, pretending to read the files in front of me, but really, I was watching Rebecca. She looked like a shell of herself, pale, anxious, her once confident smile gone. My parents wouldn't even look in my direction. The prosecutor was relentless now, armed with the documents I'd uncovered. They presented everything: the forged signatures, the fake company registration, the bank transfers that led straight from Rebecca's account to Monroe Consulting. Every piece was a nail in the coffin she had built for herself. And for the first time, Rebecca didn't even try to argue. She just sat there, staring down at the table, tears silently streaming down her face. When it was time for closing arguments, the judge cleared his throat. He was a tall, calm man in his 60s, with deep lines around his eyes, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen every kind of lie imaginable. But when he looked at me, I saw something else in his expression, something almost personal. "Before we proceed," he said softly, "I'd like to speak briefly with Ms. Jessica Monroe." The entire courtroom froze. My heart stopped. He gestured toward the bench, and the bailiff opened the gate. My legs felt like lead as I stood and walked toward him, the quiet creak of my heels echoing through the room. When I reached him, he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Miss Monroe," he said gently, "you look just like your mother did many years ago, before everything." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean?" He hesitated, eyes softening. "You don't remember me, do you?" "No, Your Honor." He gave a faint, sad smile. "I was your parents' defense attorney in a civil case before you were born. Your mother was suing a hospital for negligence. That's how they paid for your father's business to start." I frowned. "But they told me my father built it from nothing." He shook his head. "Not exactly. It was a settlement for losing a child before you." The words hit me like thunder. "What?" The judge nodded slowly. "You had a sister long before Rebecca. She died in that case. And your mother, she never recovered. When you were born, they didn't want to get attached again. They loved you, Jessica, but they were afraid to lose you. So they kept their distance, tried to give everything to Rebecca instead, because they couldn't handle losing another child." The room spun around me. The audience murmured. My mother's face turned ashen. Rebecca's eyes darted away. "So all this time," I whispered, "they treated me like I didn't matter because they were scared of losing me?" The judge's voice was kind, but heavy. "They were wrong. But fear makes people do foolish things." He paused, then added quietly, "And now that fear has destroyed everything they tried to protect." When I returned to my seat, everyone stared, reporters whispering, cameras flashing. My parents looked broken. My mother's hands trembled, her lips quivering. Rebecca just stared at the floor, eyes empty. Then the judge delivered his verdict. "Rebecca Monroe," he said, voice firm but not unkind, "this court finds you guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and falsifying financial records." Rebecca's lawyer slumped. My mother cried out quietly. The judge continued, "However, considering your cooperation after the new evidence was introduced, the court recommends leniency in sentencing." Rebecca nodded weakly, tears falling silently down her cheeks. But then he turned his gaze toward my parents. "And as for Mr. and Mrs. Monroe," he sighed deeply, "while your names aren't on trial here, it's clear your actions have enabled and deepened this tragedy. You may not face prison, but you will face consequences in your reputation, your finances, and your family." The silence that followed was deafening. When court adjourned, I stood frozen. People swarmed the hallway, journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing, but I didn't hear any of it. I just stood there, staring at the doors closing behind my sister. Rebecca was led away in handcuffs. She didn't look back. And my parents? They didn't either. For a long moment, I felt like that forgotten child again. The one who never fit in, never got invited to dinner, never got a "we're proud of you." But then, the judge stepped out of his chambers and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Jessica," he said quietly. "You spoke the truth, even when no one believed you. That takes courage most people never find." And in that moment, after years of silence, shame, and trying to be invisible, I finally believed him. That night, I drove out of the city alone. The road stretched endlessly, and for once, I didn't care where it led. The stars were clear, the air sharp, and as the courthouse lights faded behind me, I realized something. For years, I thought revenge was about making them hurt like they made me hurt. But now I saw it differently. It wasn't about destroying them. It was about freeing myself. And I had. 3 months later, I stood on the porch of the small house I'd just bought. It wasn't big, but it was mine, every single inch of it. No one's name was on the papers but mine. No lies.
No manipulation.
Just me. As I unpacked the last box, I came across an old photograph, one from my college graduation. I was smiling, cap tilted crookedly, standing alone. In the background, my parents and Rebecca were there too, but they hadn't noticed me at all. For the first time, instead of pain, I just felt peace. That girl in the photo had no idea how strong she would become. I'd spent those months working with a nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial fraud. It was something I never thought I'd do, but every person I helped reminded me that my scars could mean something. One day, while helping a young woman review her case, she looked at me and said softly, "You're the one from the Monroe case, right? The one who stood up to her family?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. She smiled. "You gave me courage. My parents stole from me too. But watching your story, it made me believe I could fight back." That was the moment I realized revenge doesn't have to destroy. It can heal if you use it right. But closure didn't come easily. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name. Rebecca. I stared at it for hours before finally opening it. "Jessica, I don't expect forgiveness. What I did to you is cruel, selfish, and unforgivable. Prison gives you too much time to think, and I've thought about everything, every insult, every time I let Mom and Dad make you feel small while I took all the praise. You didn't deserve that. You were always stronger than me, smarter too. That's why they feared you, because you reminded them of what they could never control. I don't ask you to visit me. I just want you to know you were right to speak the truth." By the time I finished reading, the paper was blurry from my tears. For years, I thought hearing her admit her guilt would bring me joy. But instead, it just brought sadness, the kind that comes from realizing how much was wasted on hate. A week later, I finally gathered the courage to visit my parents. Their once grand house looked smaller now, quieter. My father opened the door, gray, tired, older than I remembered. My mother sat by the window, her eyes distant. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then I said softly, "I got Rebecca's letter." My mother nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "She's different now. We all are." I took a deep breath. "I don't hate you anymore. I just needed to stop pretending that what you did was okay." My father's lips trembled. "We were afraid, Jessica. We didn't want to lose another daughter. And in that fear, we lost both." That broke me. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I whispered, "Maybe it's not too late to find one." My mother stood and hugged me. Not tightly, not perfectly, but real. For the first time in my life, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. That night, I drove back home. The city lights shimmered in the distance like stars scattered across the earth. I rolled down the window, letting the cool air hit my face, and smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had survived everything that wasn't. A month later, I stood at a small charity gala for fraud victims. I'd been asked to give a short speech. As I stepped onto the stage, I looked out at the faces in the crowd, some broken, some healing, some just beginning their fight. I took a deep breath and began. My name is Jessica Monroe. I used to think being invisible was safer than being seen. I used to believe family defined who you were. But I've learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover who you really are. Revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. It's about reclaiming the power they took away. And when you finally do, you don't destroy them. You free yourself. The audience rose to their feet, applause echoing through the hall. As I stepped down, I glanced at the back of the room, and for a split second, I could have sworn I saw my parents standing there, watching quietly. And though I wasn't sure if it was real or just my mind wanting closure, I smiled anyway. Because even if they weren't ready to forgive themselves, I already had. Thank you for watching till the very end. If Jessica's story moved you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Revenge Files, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful revenge story. Every week, we bring you true emotion, deep betrayal, and justice served, because every story deserves to be heard.